Hello everyone, welcome to Mining Now. I'm your host, Jared Downey. Today on the show we have Talisman Technical, and we've got two members from their team in studio. We have Justin Joubert, he is the Managing Director, and we have Ivan Budd, he is the Head of ESG at Talisman. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Thank you, Jared. Thanks for having us.
How you feeling? You recovered from your trips from Australia?
Yeah, look, it's I think long flight over, but it's been a fantastic couple of days. We've managed to see a few sites and catch up with some fantastic business contacts. So it's been an excellent trip so far.
What event are you here for?
We're here for the Mining Insurance and Risk Association event. It's effectively an event where all the global insurers come together to talk about the resources sector and insurance and underwriting and broking within the insurance sector. And the impacts associated with ESG on insurance was the key focus of this particular event.
A good event?
Yeah, fantastic. Lots of great opportunities to network and meet some of the insurers from really around the world, a number of them from the Lloyd's markets within London, but also within the Canadian markets as well. So it's been an excellent trip thus far.
That's good. Can we just kick off? We're going to get into who Talisman is. Actually, maybe just give us a quick overview first, and then we'll introduce both of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Talisman is a mining services business. We incorporated the business about 2 years ago. It's got a number of arms within it. Key focuses are around ESG, so environment, social, and governance. We build ESG strategies and frameworks for companies and align them to national and international sustainability frameworks. We build roadmaps around ESG strategy implementation and integrate those into businesses to ensure that they have not only compliance but proactive controls to support their social license to operate. Within ESG, we also have a decarbonisation arm, so we do decarbonisation baselines and emissions baselines all the way through to project determination, utilising marginal abatement cost curves to determine best NPV projects to support decarbonisation within the resources sector and beneficial reuse, particularly of gas within the coal sector as well. We have a safety, health, risk and compliance arm that fits within the ESG business as well, focusing on risk management frameworks, critical control systems, assurance, auditing, safety, health and compliance. On the other side of the business, we have a mining advisory, and the mining advisory does really everything from pre-feasibility studies, operational readiness studies, all the way through to operations, mine design, asset optimization, due diligence and IT work and the like. So very broad spectrum of offerings. What is fantastic, though, is the ESG arm fits in very nicely with the mining advisory arm in that
Right.
ESG is now required to be designed into projects. If you're going to raise cash or get insurance, etc., for a new resource operation, it's fundamentally important that ESG is considered as part of the control strategies for project development. The other arm of our business as well, a couple, is Prodmate. Essentially, it's a productivity efficiency software platform. It takes live information or electronic information off of equipment, allows you to set your own KPI dashboards and integrate that into planning boards, and effectively allows you to understand the key levers that you need to pull within your business to optimize production efficiency. So that's effectively the three arms within the Talisman Technical business unit.
I want to talk a little bit more about how they're tied together and sort of just getting into the market. We're not. An hour or 45 minutes is not going to be enough time for me to cover, but I'm going to pack as much as I can in. Ivan, you're head of ESG, and so like my role, what a lot of people will see is me doing interviews, which it makes up about 2% of my job. It's one of those things. But I'm always curious, what is in a role? What is your day to day or week to week at Talisman?
Yeah, well, look, let me maybe start by talking about what the title head of ESG means, I guess, at Talisman. But 2% of your job is doing interviews. 100% of my job is ESG, and
right.
That's everything from leading a team of amazing subject matter experts in their field. Whether they're health and safety specialists, environmental specialists, decarbonisation experts, or mining professionals. So a big part of my job is leading that team and guiding that team, and seeking out opportunities in the market for them to excel, and for us to partner with clients. So we, in the ESG team, we provide services around environmental management, environmental approvals. We help with stakeholder engagement and stakeholder mapping and how to engage communities of interest. And we have a really strong level of expertise and interest on the governance, on the ESG audit and assurance side of things. That's an area that we're incredibly passionate about at Talisman. And we see so much opportunity out in the market for our clients to improve how they do governance around sustainability, safety, environment. And we're positioning ourselves to be the partner of choice to work with those clients to excel in the governance field and find true measurable efficiencies in how they work.
Let's talk about our heavy industry tour brought to you by Savannah Equipment, supplying mining equipment worldwide, and Geograph, solving customer challenges through innovation and design, higher performing parts, engineered solutions, on-time spare parts supply, and high-quality repairs. We are heading to events across North America and Australia and filming episodes on location. Email us at info@crownsman.com to be part of Crownsman's Heavy Industry World Tour. Revolutionize your mining operations with MassPro's engineering excellence. Their engineering talent can transform your mining machinery, supercharge your productivity, and improve your equipment optimization. Your success is their mission, and they're prepared to take your mining operations to new heights by maximizing efficiency, safety, and ore extraction like never before. Head to masspro.com.au for further information. Hey mining enthusiasts, registration for CIM Connect 2024 Vancouver from May 12th to 15th is now open. Last year, this convention had over 6,800 participants from 60 countries, with 1,796 delegates, 702 booths, and 320 presentations. Secure your spot and register now at convention.cim.org. CIM Connect 2024, where quality and innovation define the experience.
I realized it's actually only in the last couple of weeks I've started to realize that I ask all these questions, and I started to think there's probably people, sitting there listening, going, "Can you just ask this? This is what I actually am watching." Is there? So I've started sort of this new little section on the show where I just go, "What do people come?" I'm not trying to get out of doing the interview myself, but I'm just what are common questions if you go to this event or. And not just like, what do you do, but the questions that maybe people are confused by around ESG, just some of the communication that you're having to just sort of educate people. Yep. What are some of those common questions? Either one of you, if you want to start with
Yeah,
it.
look, I think there's been a very common question that's been floating around industry for sort of the last 2 to 3 years as ESG landscape has changed, and that is, well, what does ESG even mean? Mm-hmm. How do I integrate it into my business and operationalize
It's
ESG?
3 huge ideas.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
the
exactly
ESG
right.
itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's been a big transition. It was sustainability not so long ago, and being pushed down as ESG now. And really, ESG is about effectively managing risk across all of the consequence profiles in your business. We've been doing safety and compliance risk for a very long time, and fundamentally looking at environment, social, and governance risk is taking a very similar approach. Understanding your material threats associated with ESG, understanding the current control strategies that you have in place to manage those material threats, the gap that exists within your business, and what's the roadmap that you need to do to close that gap, and setting some real achievable KPIs that are right sized for your organization around how you're going to track, monitor, and benchmark yourself as you close the gap on effective ESG control implementation. And the next stage of the maturity model within that is, companies were once saying, okay, well, you got an ESG strategy, tick. Now it's more about, well, let's lift the hood up and see how the controls within that ESG strategy permeate the business and are actually delivering sustainable change at the working phase. And as a result, ESG auditing and assurance is now becoming a bigger aspect of providing third-party diligence and assurance that allows key clients to be able to put their hands on their hearts and report to their shareholders and stakeholders that what they're actually saying they're doing within their ESG strategy is occurring and taking place. There's been a number of artificial intelligence software platforms that had been developed, particularly within the financial markets, providing rating scores for ESG. And what that would do is just scrape information off of websites and public reports, and tick a number of boxes and give them a rating score. So as you can see, the maturity around ESG is changed fundamentally now, and it's no longer good enough to tick the box.
I can just see a company seeing that report going up and be like, really? That's how we got the
Yeah,
just some auto report that got generated.
Yeah. So the main questions we're facing now, is, well, how do I integrate? Well, it's not so much how do I integrate ESG, because I think everyone's sort of moved along that journey a little bit. It's what value can I get out of ESG? How can I make it positive? How can I bring initiatives in that are MPV positive for the business? The waste products that I'm generating from our mining, from the mining activities I'm being undertaken, how can they beneficially be reused? How can I integrate that into, a circular economy? And ultimately, all of these are good news stories that support the company's social license to operate. They effectively help you to better manage your risk profile across your operations and your corporate business, and they give you better governance systems. So make the business, once it's all integrated, operate far more efficiently.
Yeah. You had something to add?
Oh, no, I was just going to go on from that, and Justin wrapped it up by expanding on sort of strategy through to implementation, and then and now people want to know how to measure that. So what does measuring ESG performance look like? And that's where sort of scraping a whole bunch of data from different sources isn't necessarily measuring it, but measuring it at dare I say it, at the front line, or wherever the point of implementation is of an initiative, and having performance measures and metrics that can truly reflect performance, then that leads us to transparency, which I think is something else that industry and our clients are seeking is, well, how can we confidently be transparent around our performance?
Yeah.
Bentek Group is an industry leader when it comes to design, engineering, and manufacturing. Bentek specializes in engineered safety and efficiency equipment such as access platforms, heavy-duty workbenches, work stands and trestles, material and equipment storage, and a range of lifting and handling solutions to maximize safety for your personnel. But that's not their only area of expertise. Bentek also supply high-performance OEM replacement parts for mobile equipment. Bentek's rocks mining parts are built better, eliminating downtime and maximizing efficiency. Visit bentekgroup.com.au today to explore their range. Orica Digital Solutions seamlessly connects customers' physical and digital worlds so they can readily understand and optimize operations at every step of the value chain, from exploration to processing. Whether deployed individually or as a whole, Orica Digital Solutions technologies deliver intelligence for open-cut and underground mines to make more precise and faster decisions. With a complete, timely, and accurate picture, operations can adapt to improve safety, drive productivity, reduce costs, and environmental impacts. To learn more about Orica Digital Solutions, visit orica.com/digital solutions today.
What does it look like, though, getting into it? And I'll try to ask this in a way that makes sense. It makes sense in my own head. Okay, 10 years ago, let's say, before, when ESG was it was starting to get talked about more, but now it's full. And, well, I guess it's probably longer than 10 years now. I'm not very good at my timeline, but how have companies had to make have all these companies had to make big adjustments, or is it just about now documenting it properly? Like, have some of them already operating at a very high level, they just weren't rated high?
I think the key in that, Jared, is that no one company is the same when it comes to ESG. So it wouldn't be fair to say, all companies are doing something, they just haven't been able to document it, to use your words, or have a structure around it. Or it's also unfair to say, well, no one's doing anything around ESG.
Right.
That's what's so important in this, is that every organisation is unique.
Right.
And understanding where each organisation is at on their maturity journey around ESG is like the first step. It's like your ticket to the game, is understand the current level of maturity for each organisation. From there, then we can go, okay, well, what makes sense? Based on the nature and scale of your organisation, what makes sense as next steps around your ESG journey. So that uniqueness of each organisation's maturity around ESG is I think the first and foremost response to your question.
Right. What is a mature ESG strategy? Actually, backing up before they're even putting together that data. What does a mature strategy look like? What is a company operating well? Can you paint us a picture of that?
Integration. So integration is the key, I think, to maturity. So what I mean by that is perhaps we don't even see an ESG strategy. We just see a business strategy. We see a 5-year plan, or we see a life of asset plan, and there's key ESG initiatives built into that organisational plan overall. To me, I don't know what you think, Justin, but to me that's the sign of maturity, is that we're not even talking about ESG. We're just talking about the organisation's plan, and a key pillar of that ESG related initiatives.
It's integrated right into every level of operation.
Yeah, it's and look, Arvin makes a good point. It becomes part of the way you do business. So the large scale companies and tier 1 operators have been playing in this space for a very long time, and they have big internal ESG teams that have been helping that journey over a period of time. But the majority of the market is made up of mid-tier and lower tier mining operators.
And I'm glad you bring that up, because we've had on the show, we do talk a lot about tier 1.
Yeah.
And I come from more the smaller operating side. So I'm always part of it is just have a little bit of a heart for I kind of champion small business. Even though we work with the big companies too, but. And I'm just wondering what it looks like for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mentioned it a little bit earlier. The bigger companies who are far more advanced on their journey would have really been through, materiality assessments, engaged their stakeholders to understand what's key and material to them as a business. I spoke about, the operational process then of, understanding your current baseline. What are your gaps? What does your strategy over the next couple of years look like to close those gaps? And then really it's about documenting that in a clearly articulated strategy, or also known as an annual sustainability report, that then goes out and talks about all the things that you've been doing. A lot of the mid-tiers and explorers are still grasping the concept of ESG, let alone operationalizing it into their system. And we play a lot in the mid-tier market, as well as, we do work with some of the tier 1 operators as well. But it's really about helping the companies to actually understand what's material to you. If you're a copper mine versus a coal mine, you might have different threats and different material ESG topics that you need to consider, and you need to have different strategies around how you're effectively managing them. So on the opposite end of the spectrum, and this is why I talked to you about the maturity model, ad hoc would be, a lot of the juniors and explorers who are still fundamentally trying to understand what it all means, and looking at their balance sheet and deciding whether there's sufficient funds and whether we should just go for minimum compliance to legislation, or whether we should be proactively integrating some more of these strategies into our business. The push is becoming bigger and bigger because those explorers transitioning into operations, they need to now be able to demonstrate their ESG credentials as part of that transition. So companies are starting to do more and more in the mid-tier market, and that's just a natural progression along the maturity model. The other thing is, a lot of companies are doing a bunch of great things, and they're just not clearly documenting it, as you said, and pulling it all together to say, we're in fact undertaking a number of initiatives that relate to ESG. We're just not publicizing it well. And I guess the last point on that as well is the legislation has, become more and more, I guess not so much prohibitive, but particular around compliance, in particular, legislative compliance around environment, governance, social requirements. So we've seen a lot of the soft laws that come from, these sustainability frameworks that are starting to transition into hard legislation. And that's also driving juniors, explorers, and tier 1 operators to become more mature on their ESG journey as well.
That legislative side of it is, especially for your exploration, your mid-tier, I could see it being a real challenge, because if you're tier 1, you have the budget, you have the need for it, you're working on a global scale, it all sort of fits together, and it makes clear sense. But on these, as you go down the line, do you think, this is not a political question by any stretch, but from a legislative point of view, how do you see it that government can make it at least clear? How is it clear to these companies? Is it clear to an exploration company what they need to do, or is it still sort of murky and confusing?
Yeah, look, I think within the Australian context, there's very well documented requirements around your legislative obligations. all the way through from exploration into, having an exploration permit for an exploration permit or exploration license, all the way into mineral development, and then effectively a mining lease. That legislative pathway is very clear.
Very clear, yeah.
The environmental legislation and the safety and health legislation, depending on which jurisdiction you're working in, is very clear as well. The Australian resources sector has come a long way in terms of regulatory framework improvements and the introduction of, particularly within Coal Queensland, risk-based legislation as well, which allows operators to make risk-based decisions as long as it's evidence-based and followed through the right process. So legislation is certainly clear within the Australian context, and is well understood by explorers all the way through to tier 1 operators.
And then on the, actually, I want to stay on this. What is with a mid-tier or exploration company, when they're what types of things you were talking about? Just doing basically the minimum, checking the boxes. What is reasonable for them that you see some companies could do, or what kind of recommendations? What are you talking to them about when they're trying to take it beyond just checking a box, just trying to do the bare minimum?
Yeah, I mean, we talk to them about what's the right size solution for them.
Yeah,
because again,
which is such a large scale for everybody.
That's right.
Yeah.
The mid tiers and the juniors, that they're not tier 1s, and to have the sort of governance frameworks or the system and standard frameworks around them that a tier 1 has is not going to work. It's a level of bureaucracy that they don't need. Whereas the tier 1s do need a certain level of bureaucracy to manage such a global footprint. And so what we talk to them about is, well, what's the nature and scale of your business? Mm-hmm. And then we partner with them to work through what solutions can look like. And I think also what's important is, well, what do you want to be as well? It's like, it's like when you get asked a question as a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, I want to be a detective or whatever it might be. Like, it's important that we understand the aspirations of companies as well, so that we can not only right-size the solutions now, but future-proof them as well for their growth portfolio or whatever their future looks like.
When you ask them that question, do they sometimes not know the answer, though?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like me when I was a kid, I didn't know what I wanted to be.
Yeah, it's
where I am now.
Yeah. So when you're talking about, like, what kind of things could they do? I'm just picturing some of these smaller operators that I know of. They've got diesel. They're not planning to switch out and electrify their whole fleet, right? They've just 10 years ago or 7 years ago, they just bought these new trucks. Sure. That type of thing. Just how do you sort of approach it? You sort of have to find their vision first.
Yeah, we do. We have to find their vision. We have to I think you touched on a really important point. Like, we have to understand some of the backstory as well, right? Like, where have they come from?
Where have they put their capital over the last?
That's right. And so, I mean, there's a myriad of initiatives around efficiency. Like, diesel use is something that you use. Well, how are they tracking fuel burn rates? How are they then using, or are they tracking that sort of information? And if they are, what are they doing with that data?
Sometimes it's just a case of tracking it, not what they're doing, but just how they're tracking it.
It could be, yeah. And I think it goes back to a point Justin made, which I think is so critical in everything we do. What are you already doing?
Right.
Like, what are you already working on that perhaps we just haven't joined the dots on?
Right.
To go, okay, well, that practice that you're doing as a day-to-day part of your operation, have you looked at that in the broader ESG landscape to go, oh, you know what, that actually satisfies, these 10 different requirements? Or if we just adjust that, if we just start to use the data that we collect to look at efficiency rates of our mobile fleet, we can reduce diesel consumption by X%, which will then have flow-on effects to emissions targets and so on. So
I think really, we talked about materiality before, and across Ivan mentioned the ESG landscape. So, more specifically, if you're going and talking with an operator, throughout the E from ESG, you might be looking at anything from flora, fauna, water, groundwater, ecology, the S, stakeholder engagement, how you're managing, adjustees, overlapping tenure holders and the like, all the way through to native title and cultural heritage. And within the governance, you know, what systems do you already have that are effectively managing some of these risks as well as your legislative compliance obligations, and then helping them to build those processes out. And some of those strategies, like Arvin said, you know, there might be something around, well, we've identified a high diesel usage. Is there an option for electrification? You know, if you're a coal mine, well, what are we doing with the gas? Are we flaring the gas? Are we capturing the gas? Are we using it for CNG conversion for new trucks? Or have we got our own, gas power station on site that we're using to power the site and then put it back in to reduce our emissions profile? So there's a number of opportunities across the ESG spectrum, like Arvin mentioned, where there's initiatives that can be developed based on what's material to that business to make sure that they are better managing that risk.
Yeah, and one final piece which I don't think we've hit on enough is this is all about getting better. Right? This is all about improving performance. It's improving environmental performance. It's improving relationships with our communities of interest. You know, it's improving governance and transparency. So all of this is about improving and getting better. And I think that's a point that we perhaps haven't touched on enough so far, is that, like, if you strip it all back to integrated risk management that you were talking about and just getting better, that's certainly part of what motivates me. Is, well, we can partner with organisations to just be better.
Yeah.
One of the key reasons we're over at the moment we've spoken about operationalising this ESG journey, and then the back end of it being, well, now you need to do some assurance around verifying that it's actually in place and working. We're focusing on 3 key markets within that space, and that's why we're over here to meet with some of the insurers. One is with the insurance markets as part of insurance placements and renewals. So, you know, what risk are they writing? Do they understand the counterparty risk?
The insurer.
The insurer, or the underwriter, or even the broker. You know, who are they working with? Do they understand their ESG obligations? There's been a lot of insurers moving away from the resources sector because of pressures from their stakeholders and their shareholders relating to ESG, but there's been very little assessment of ESG risk. It's very much focused on business loss scenarios and how those affect your premium. So really we've looked to create an arm within our business that focuses particularly within the insurance sector, whether that's risk engineering surveys and then tying in ESG assessments into that as well to give them a more holistic view of what they are writing risk on. The other 2 markets really are the capital markets. So as part of sustainable lending practices, if you want to go raise capital, or the banks want to lend money to investment opportunities, they now want to understand how those companies are managing ESG and whether they have sufficient credentials and controls in place. And then, you know, potentially covenants of that lending are checking that those are in place on an annual basis. And lastly, the other key market is the resource operators, as part of verifying the effective implementation of their ESG control strategies.
I think I asked a question earlier. I asked it too sort of at a high level because I asked for what are examples, and it was a little bit too vague. So I think I'll kind of circle back to it and say, are there companies then that just because they just don't know how to communicate it, they could have access to capital, they could get a better insurance, but because they just don't know how to put it together, they're maybe 90% of the way there. They just don't know how to document, put it together.
Potentially.
Yeah,
absolutely. And look, legislation probably gets companies half the way there, and then it becomes about
that's kind of what I'm getting at.
How do I pull everything together and clearly articulate this in a framework that comes that is built into my operating practices and the way we run business. And then certainly within the other 50%, there's a bunch of initiatives that will help you on that trajectory to improving your performance.
So when you're at that stage, when you're trying to get them to the other 50%, what are they seeing from there? And I was on your, I think I was on maybe your website or LinkedIn, and I was seeing, it was like a screen. You're doing like a screen recording, and it was like people putting in all these different data sets and then getting different. What was I watching there?
You were watching. We partnered with a company called Forward, who run a global critical control software platform. It's in about 800 sites around the world. We partnered with them to build a ESG auditing software solution.
It looked amazing, by the way.
It is. And look, the idea there is that that software platform, we can integrate any sustainability frameworks, any standards, the internal risk threshold of the clients who we're auditing, any minimum performance criteria. Essentially, any question sets can go into that database. We then bring the operational expertise around ESG and our operational backgrounds within the resources sector to execute on third-party independent auditing, utilizing the software platform itself. And then ultimately what that allows us to do is use the data more effectively. There's a data analytics capability in the software that's absolutely brilliant. It allows you to pull apart information, comparative analysis, benchmarking. It's even got AI built into it, natural language, so you can ask it questions.
I saw that,
in the background, and it'll run you all the different graphs. Who's my highest risk? Where do I need to focus or prioritize? Some of our energy on as it relates to stakeholder engagement or environmental management or whatever it might be. So, fantastic platform.
And I wanted to clarify too. Is this you're agnostic towards it? It could be a gold or copper or coal, or you're sort of working across the board, right?
Yeah, that's right. And the point around it being agnostic, I think, is really important in that every jurisdiction is different from a legislative compliance perspective. From a social perspective, there's nuances based on jurisdiction. There's nuances based on commodity. So the beauty of the solution in the ESG audit and assurance space is its flexibility. Justin was talking about, it can incorporate any global sustainability framework. And that's really important because, if you're a coal mining operator in Australia, you're going to subscribe to certain responsible mining standards that are different to what a copper operation in British Columbia is going to subscribe to. So that we can tailor then the inputs to the platform that makes sense to that operation, where they are situated around the world, and what commodity they play in. And I think then you can even extrapolate it further, right? To go, well, it's industry agnostic as well, because you might be in aerospace or manufacturing and and be a member of other responsible operating standards around sustainability. So the framework that we apply around breaking down what your obligations are into bite-sized pieces, systemizing that through sophisticated software, that's applicable to just about any industry in any jurisdiction.
I do feel like mining, out of all the industries, heavy industries, has the toughest go of it, in the sense that they have to move so much. It's the old thing, they have to move so much of this to get that little thing, right? Whereas in, let's say, manufacturing, your waste is actually once you get the product there, it's actually very minimal. Mining it's got this complete reverse of how they have to do it.
Well, yeah, and that creates expectations, external expectations, rightfully so.
Yeah.
And so, how is the industry meeting those expectations? Yeah. And that's where we come in with this solution particularly is, right, what are those expectations and what are we going to do about it? Or what are we already doing about it?
And is there, when you're going into a company, is there an opportunity for, not just on the ESG side, but for the bottom line? Are you able to find, because sometimes efficiency, well, if you're taking away the ESG side, efficiency a lot of times will result in just a better bottom line. That's what it's getting to. Are you able to work with that? Do you find that those two, well, you said a mature strategy, they sort of merge together. Are you able to kind of close that gap?
Yeah, I think, impacts to the bottom line, there's a number of initiatives that will absolutely provide benefits to the bottom line within ESG. It's about understanding which initiatives those are. So, in decarbonisation, as an example, we spoke a little bit about coal mining and the beneficial reuse of gas. If you're draining your gas, the legislation in Australia, you might be set with a baseline emissions profile, and if you go over, then you have to essentially acquire Australian carbon credit units. And if you go over a couple 100,000 tonnes at $75 for a credit unit, and it's 1 tonne per CO2 equivalent, then you're going to be paying a lot of money. So proactive strategies that, and that's the purpose, particularly within decarbonisation, around doing these marginal abatement cost curves, because they allow you to identify the projects that are going to give you the best bang for your buck and that are actually NPV positive. So if you can bring down those baseline emissions, you're not paying a significant fine, or fine, you're not buying carbon credit units, should I say.
That's kind of like fine.
Yeah. And at the same time, you have the opportunity then to demonstrate those initiatives within your ESG strategy and, publicize that to your stakeholders. So there's many benefits. Decarbonisation is just one of them.
Yeah.
But certainly there's also intangible benefits that come along with that as well. Access to capital we've spoken about, access to insurance, your social license to operate, beneficial relationships with your stakeholders in the communities in which you operate. So all of those factors, which are very difficult to measure from a monetary perspective and bottom line perspective, but certainly add significant value to the business and the way it operates.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit, just sort of as we get to the tail end, about that social license to operate, because it's a tricky one. Again, I might stumble a bit here trying to clarify what I mean in that I feel like what ends up happening, because I have so many conversations both on and off camera, is there's, on the extreme ends, there's people that basically they don't want mining anywhere, which is obviously that's a non-starter. You need mining. So that's a bit of a tough one to even deal with. But then there's people that have a very high expectation of mining. Then you have people that are the ESG, the demands, access to capital, if you don't sort of check these boxes and things like that, has been very frustrating for some people. And I sometimes feel like part of what it is just lack of these types of conversations, just clarifying what it actually is. Because it's, sometimes you hear it in like leadership talks. It's like you're talking about like motivating your team, and it gets really, really high level to the point that as you can't even understand what we're trying to do anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, sometimes you just, take one of your team members for a coffee and ask them how they're doing, every few months. Like sometimes it's just really simple stuff. And that's a very long-winded way of asking, though, and I think it's an important question. How can mining do a better job of explaining to the public? And this is a show for it because this is a public. This is on YouTube. Anybody can watch it, and a lot of people do from outside the sector. How can mining do a better job? And I'm going to preface it by, a lot of times I've been seeing the new one is, look at your smartphone. It's all coming from mining. I've never really seen that. It works great in the mining industry. Everybody goes, yeah, look at what we make. And it's true. But I feel like there's still a disconnect. That people don't quite, and someone asked me a question a little while ago about what other industries do well. Construction, they build, you're in New West here, you see it. Construction disrupts everything. And people don't mind because they know we need it. It's just socially accepted. We need these buildings. There's a demand. We want more buildings. Mining doesn't have that. And it should have it because the demand is just as big. Literally, the buildings you're seeing out there come from mining. I think you're probably the right people to ask this. How can mining do a better job of just connecting with that local community, even politicians feeling like they should get behind it, feeling like they can because the mining industry has done their legwork to get society behind it? Do you have any suggestions for it? Easy question.
You said before that this is not political, so we'll make sure we stay in that lane. I think at times.
Well, political is like who you're voting. Yeah. But I think governance is. I mean, government pressure and all that stuff. Those are just real.
Yeah, it's real. That's pressure from our communities of interest, whether it's government, local communities, Indigenous bodies. It's all real, and it should be treated as such. And I think the industry, by and large, does a good job of treating that seriously. I also think perhaps we're a little hard on ourselves as an industry as well, at times because of those externalities that apply pressure to our industry.
Yeah.
So, are we promoting and celebrating our successes as much as other industries? I think it depends who you are. I think it depends what organisation you are and how big you are.
I mean, I do interviews from all across industry, so I can say no. I can tell you the answer is no.
Yeah. And I think that's particularly important again for some of the smaller operators.
Yeah.
Around promoting their local successes in the communities in which they operate. We sort of touched on transparency a little bit as well. I think the industry is getting better at transparency of performance. And I think as we continue to be more transparent and be brave around transparency, and own it, because transparency is sometimes showing where we're not performing as well as we'd like. And so I think the being brave enough to be open and transparent and communicate with candor and honesty will continue to help the industry. And I think celebrating what we do well is perhaps something that I think some players do it now through annual sustainability reports, that the first half of the report is all about everything that those organisations are doing in their communities, which is awesome. And then the back end of the reports tends to be sort of more of to use some of your words, tangible performance and data. So, and I think that's a good mix, because I think some people respond to data and some people respond to stories. Yeah. So, but I think overall, perhaps a little hard on ourselves, which means don't sort of translate that to mean we can take our foot off the pedal. It's quite the opposite. I think we need to be more forward-facing around transparency of performance, and that'll continue to help us.
Well, and shameless plug, Talisman is trying to make it so that companies can be more transparent and the news is better.
Yeah,
I mean, right.
I think also, just to build on what Arvin was saying, a lot of the mining operations are remote, and so the public doesn't really see a copper mine or a gold mine or a coal mine, and it's a bit out of sight, out of mind. And there's generally the media, has negative stories around the impacts of the resources sector on the world. But we only have to reflect on where we're at. Mining has essentially contributed to every industrial revolution we've had. It's given us everything that we have in modern society today. And it does a hell of a lot around sustainability, ESG, and pours billions of dollars into these strategies to maintain their competitive advantage and to stay competitive and to meet societal demands. So, fundamentally, I think that perhaps it's more of education back into the public around the good things that resource operators are actually doing. Publicizing, like Ivan said to his point, there's some fantastic initiatives that are going on across the world. And perhaps if the public saw some of those initiatives and we better educated the public, then the sentiment might change a little bit, particularly as it relates to coal. But it's a journey, and I think it's going to continue to be a journey.
Coal's the funny one, right? Yeah. The confusion around coal is like steel making coal, it's a lot of confusion around it. Yeah. But I agree with what both you're saying, and I've actually been starting to champion this on the show. I don't pick up a lot of causes, but this one sort of fits. Is that I do think mines need to. It's like you see a billboard, and it's like a picture of like a little kid on a boat in a lake, and it's for a mine. It's like, okay, I get it, but that could be anything. It doesn't. To the public, it doesn't mean anything. And people do. What I've been trying to say is, people like things. They like seeing technology. I mean, look at what Elon Musk. Look at the fanfare. I mean, and he gets pushback. Everything you do, you're going to get pushback. But because he shows the thing that he's doing, and he focuses on this, we're going to the moon, and here's the rocket, and people love it. I do think mining. I don't think the mining industry realizes how into some of this technology people will actually be. The mining trucks and the efficiency they're doing, and recovering diesel and all this sort of this things that's happening. People just don't know it. So why would they support it? Because they don't know it's happening. And I do hope that over time mines get better, the mining industry gets better. I think you're right on the head of just showing off about it a little bit more. Don't try to make it about something else. Actually say what you're doing. And of course, get Talisman to make it right. What do you... where do you see, over the next couple of years, sort of what are your goals for the company? What do you want it to accomplish? What kind of moves do you want to make in the industry?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of key areas within our business that we're looking to advance on. ESG, auditing and risk engineering and the like, and partnering with companies to help them improve their businesses from an ESG perspective and better validate their ESG strategies is certainly something that's going to, as the mid-tiers continue to become tier ones and the juniors and explorers continue to become mid-tiers, is going to be a continuous evolution and continuous journey. And helping other sectors, we mentioned being sector agnostic, whether that's the insurance markets or the capital markets, on a very similar journey to make sure that, it's not just the resources sector that's giving key focus to these particular areas. It's financial markets, energy markets, which I know already are, but just assisting them on that journey. Within the mining advisory business, we're certainly looking to build out the business across jurisdiction and internationally as well as the ProdMate business, which has several opportunities in international jurisdictions at the moment. So ideally, in a couple of years, the business has tripled in size, and we're working not just within Australia, but across some of the international resource jurisdictions, and adding benefit to clients in terms of, partnerships, long-term lasting relationships, making sure that we're delivering value.
How important is it, just to sort of wrap it up, how important is maintaining, I'm assuming a company can't come in and you come in for 2 or 3 months and all the problems are solved. I can't imagine it's that type of thing. What does it actually take if a company's coming in, even if they're doing some good things, maybe let's say a company that's 80% of the way there, but there's definitely things that they can do. How long does it take? And we can go a tier 1 or we can go mid-tier or exploration, whichever one you sort of pick, to sort of onboard a really good strategy to really get to that maturity state.
Yeah, look, I think every company's different, like Arvin said at the beginning, so it depends how big the problems are. I think the first step is understanding what the problem is, and understanding your material issues, and then understanding what you're doing within the business at this point in time. The strategy from there might be, it doesn't take a significantly long period of time to create a strategy. Right. It's more about the execution of the strategy, which is rarely where value is delivered. So, the strategy could be, a couple of weeks based on interactions with stakeholders and key personnel within that business. But, we're building 5-year implementation plans at the moment. So, some of the projects cost money, and you need to integrate that into your budgeting process. Some of the projects take time, take human resources, and take energy. So it's about right-sizing it for the risk appetite for that particular business, where they stand in terms of their current performance and how quickly they want to close that gap.
Yeah, I'd love to be on the wall in some of those discussions you're having. I'm sure it gets very interesting.
The last thing Justin said was around the appetite for change. If there's no appetite for change, then it perhaps may take a little longer.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, but that appetite for change is sort of, I guess, part of what you're doing is trying to get them to different points in the communication.
Yeah, and that's part of the value proposition, right? Is if we can demonstrate the value, or when we demonstrate the value in operationalising ESG or doing ESG audit and assurance to create transparency, part of that is demonstrating what the value of that is to the client. And the value then creates, more appetite for change.
Well, I will say both of you, and I've had, similar type conversations sort of from different angles, but both of you are sort of laying it out really nicely. And that I think that's just part of it, just getting people's comfort level. We were talking off air about, people talking about their problems, getting to them to the point where they can actually tell you what they want to do. They find the goal that they actually have over the next 5 years, all those sort of things. Again, I'd love to be a fly on the wall for some of those conversations. But gentlemen, thank you very much for coming in. Coming all the way to New West, and I know you got to get back to an event, so I won't keep you any longer. But I do appreciate you coming into our studio and doing this.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Cheers.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. Of course, we'll have links to Talisman right in the description of the video if you're watching on YouTube. If you've seen this on platforms like LinkedIn, they'll be tagged. Both Justin and Ivan will be tagging them and have links to their LinkedIn as long as they're okay with that. You can connect directly with them. Everyone, thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Mining Now.